A lot of clients go, we'll just take what the vendor tells us. It's the out-of-the-box process. But out-of-the-box has got a lot of meanings to a lot of different people. If you go into a plan and prepare phase, not knowing what your current process is, you cannot possibly understand what your future process is going to be.
Welcome everyone to another episode of SMC on the Couch. We've got a very special guest. Yes, he is my brother, Filip Dimkovski. Welcome, Filip. So we've got a really interesting topic today. We want to focus this topic on the planning and preparation activities. So the commencement of the implementation, which we think is super critical once you go and select the vendor and a partner. So I'd like to talk about, three distinct topics there. Similar to mine is you play the role of trusted advisor. I know you like to get very involved in your projects as well. But in your role as trusted advisor on the projects that you've done, and you've done a number of really large ones all over the East Coast and over in WA as well. That planning exercise, once you go and select, there's a particular reason why we separate it as a phase, right? And that is to kind of align all the parties, right? And to make sure everyone sort of understands what they're about to go into. Once they've selected each other, it's almost like once the match is being made, right? It's about getting the right understanding. So there's a lot of expectations to align, right? So
It's true.
What are some of the common planning challenges that you've run into with some of your projects?
Yeah. So look, I'll start off by saying that we need to use the analogy of select and negotiate is kind of like the first date. The planning phase is that continuous dating exercise, while the implementation is kind of like the marriage or getting there, right?
Yeah.
So during the first date, everybody's on their best behavior, right? So and everybody knows each other superficially. At the end of that, you can make a decision who you want to obviously continue dating, so to speak. Once you get into the planning phase, that's really, as you say, the most critical phase, because this actually sets up that project for the project for success. Ultimately, the planning phase is where you move away from the sales arm of the vendor and the partner through to their deployment arm, so the essentially service delivery arm. And this is where you can actually start working on how the relationship is going to obviously work with that partner going forward. So some of the most common challenges that we encounter during the planning phase is, I'll start off with the most basic one, is resourcing, right? Every client, every vendor says we have the resources to do this. However, when you actually start building up the resourcing plan at the very beginning during the planning phase, you quickly start to understand that you do not have those resources, and you can't do an implementation together in conjunction with your BAU activities or business as usual activities. You do actually need to have dedicated resources on the project to be able to execute a project of this nature. The next biggest challenge is understanding the impact of this project, of an ERP project implementation or an enterprise system project implementation is going to have on your organization. Often, organizations always start with saying, we are open to change, we want it all, right? But ultimately what they don't realize is how is this going to impact them? And how much is it going to change their daily activities after the system goes live? Yeah. Therefore, it is very critical to understand those components during the planning phase and get the full buy-in from the client resources to understand that this is how we're going to be impacted after we go live. Yeah. Often, we hear things like from clients where they say, oh, well, the vendor and partner will be able to manage change for me. They'll be able to manage everything for me. I just need to provide the subject matter experts for the implementation. What they don't realize, the vendor and partner, yes, they will manage components, but they will manage the components they need to deliver. They will not manage the client-side resources. And this is where there's a big disconnect. Another critical area that often gets overlooked is data. It's imperative to understand you cannot do an implementation without having nice, clean, structured data in your new system. You cannot go and start doing any level of testing without knowing how that's going to look like at the end. Having poor data means that you're going to get poor results in testing. Yeah. Means that you're not going to be able to establish all your testing scenarios and test out all your business processes the right way. And probably if I were to summarize the last big ticket item is really understanding your business process. if you go into a plan and prepare phase, not knowing what your current process is, you cannot possibly understand what your future process is going to be.
Or the impact, right, between the two.
Correct, yes. So not knowing what your current process is, you're not going to be able to understand the impact, but more importantly, not knowing what you want is also another big ticket item that's a risk essentially, and it's a big gap that a lot of clients go, we'll just take what the vendor tells us. Is the out of the box process, but out of the box has got a lot of meanings to a lot of different people. It's going to make it very hard for the vendors and partners to be able to give you what you want. They're there to provide you advice, they're there to guide you, but they cannot make those decisions.
Yeah, they're there to best apply the technology to your requirement, and they're there to guide you away from a wrong decision. But what they're not there to do is answer every single business question that you have. Because
Absolutely.
A, they don't know it, and B, they're unable to answer a question that you hold the answer to.
Think about it this way. All the resources on the project are one team. Whether that's SMC, whether that's the vendor or the partner, whether that's the client, it's just one team.
Yeah.
And it's important that all of us go in the same direction. Otherwise, we're not going to get the best outcome for the project, because ultimately, nobody wants to get started on a project of this nature,
Yeah.
not wanting to succeed at the back end of it.
Yeah. What happens in the situation when, let's say, the partner and the vendor are not suitable for a client during that plan and prepare? There is a point in time when there is a question whether we should remain down that path.
So, first of all, the vendors are essentially the developers of the software. So if we look at it, I'll use one example, and I'm only using this as an example. Oracle is a vendor, right? They develop the software, they provide the licensing, they provide the infrastructure that software goes on. So that's essentially the vendor. A partner essentially is a system implementer. So essentially what they do is they take the product from the vendor and they apply their expertise to best deploy it for a particular client. So some partners may specialize in manufacturing, some of them may specialize in mining, and so on. And then we also have partners that are more generic. They don't specialize in the industry, but they can essentially implement the product in a more general sense. And partners can also bring their own IP to a particular product. So you're quite right. They are two different things. We also have to acknowledge the fact that there are some vendors that are also implementers. So some vendors can implement their products, and some vendors strictly work through a partner network. That relation must be there. Otherwise, it'll be very hard for the partner to be able to understand what the future holds for the product. Yeah. And then it will be very hard for them to tailor their add-ons to that product, because if they don't know how the product is going to be developed going forward, they wouldn't be able to tailor that for that product.
That's right. Yeah.
As I said, during the selection phase, everybody's on the best behavior. You come into the planning phase. The planning phase serves for two purposes, or maybe three if we want to call it that way. So the first purpose is obviously set up the project for success. We've already spoken about that and some of the risks and some of the big challenges in that area. The second part is really to understand, can we as an organization work with the partner we have selected to be able to deploy the product for us? If we like the product, but we just cannot gel with the partner, there may be other options available to us, and I'll talk about some of those things. In the third reason why we do a plan and prepare phase is that during the selection phase, we may decide great product, great partner, but as we go through the planning phase, we may uncover some really big red flags with the product that renders it not possible for us to implement and use in the organization. So that planning phase serves three purposes, and by doing it in such a way, we're de-risking ourselves for the future, because we have that stage gate at the end of the planning phase to say whether we want to continue with that particular partner or that particular product, or both. I must say, in the 5 years that I've been with SMC, it has happened once where the client has really liked the product. However, they had massive challenges with the solution partner or the partner itself that could not be resolved. And in a lot of cases, you can actually come up with a workable solution going forward to be able to still continue working with that particular partner and get a successful outcome. And I have had situations where I've been involved, where I've been the trusted advisor during the planning phase, where that has happened. If you cannot, in any way, shape, or form, find a way forward, because we have the planning phase, because we have the stage gate, we have a way forward by looking at, okay, we like the product, we can't find a solution to continue with this particular partner. Now let's have a look at what other partners or which other partners are available there. And again, the vendor plays a pivotal role here, because normally what we would be doing is we go to the vendor to say, these are the challenges we have. We've tried everything possible to resolve those challenges. We cannot. We really want to stay with the product, but we really need another integration partner. Therefore, we go through the process of trying to then select a new partner. But the work that has been done during the plan and prepare phase, it's not just water under the bridge. We actually can use all that information with the new partner and very quickly get them onboarded and very quickly understand how they can help us, and really don't have to repeat the whole thing from scratch. We can continue from where we left off, make small adjustments, and then continue with the process.
I suppose sometimes you could ask, why don't you join arms with another partner to supplement some of the gaps you have, right? But like a different version of that, find a different partner, right?
No, you're quite right. I mean, it can be a good outcome in the end, because you can have two partners that specialize in two different areas of the solution to work collaboratively. It will add more governance oversight, just because you have more parties to manage, but it is another option. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. I've been involved personally in projects where we've had half a dozen partners across different solutions. It's not common on every project. It is very important to acknowledge that these are all large, complex, multi-year projects. Smaller projects, usually you can work with a simplified approach, and a lot of the partners nowadays come up with what we call a solution offering. And what that means is that they will prime the implementation of the full enterprise system stack, while they will manage the relationship with any third parties. With the third party, which ultimately ends up being easier to manage for us and for the client.
Let's say that during a planning and preparation, we find that the product may not be fully suited, or that. What about that situation?
Our selection phase is not a selection phase where you just look at one solution. So we always have a backup solution during the selection phase. And the planning phase allows us to basically say, if we cannot make our business process work with the solution that was our preferred solution, we always have that option to go back to the second preferred solution and understand how that's going to look like for us. It's not common that it happens, but we have some options at the back end of it. And ultimately, what we need to do is we, as SMC, as the client and the vendor and the partner, sit down together, try to work through those differences, and only if we cannot find a workable solution, it's at that point in time when you would, as I call it, invoke the nuclear option, which is the big red button, and say, okay, we're stopping here because we cannot see how we can be able to continue with this project forward.
Just on a bit of a separate topic, and kind of helping in this situation when you do find yourself questioning whether you continue down a relationship path or a technology path, what do you think are the core concepts and core competencies of the trusted advisor in that respect, when you're talking to clients about these difficult conversations?
One of the core competencies has to be a full and in-depth understanding of how enterprise systems work and how the relationships between the vendors and the partners work. I think that's very critical, right? Understanding the full life cycle of an enterprise system implementation is critical. So ERP systems, enterprise systems, best-of-breed systems have a set of stages that they need to all go through to be able to be successfully deployed at a client side to maximize the benefits out of those systems. We can have a lot of poorly deployed systems that don't give you any benefits. In fact, they introduce more problems. So knowing the full life cycle, knowing how those relationship works, and most importantly, being impartial. There shouldn't be any emotion as part of being a trusted advisor. You should really be looking at it, understanding exactly where all parties are coming from, and try to be that impartial, voice of calm, balanced view, yes, to basically indicate, to see both sides of the story and really try to find a middle ground between all parties to be able to then have a successful deployment of that solution. I think that's critical as part of it, and definitely having been involved in some successful and potentially failed projects does definitely add value to being that trusted.
You've got to have a bit of scar tissue. I mean, all of us.
Absolutely.
Anyone who says they haven't had challenges or, have made some mistakes in the past, and they obviously haven't been through enough projects. We've done quite a lot individually and obviously at SMC. So, no, that's really good. So, Filip, thanks so much for joining us on the couch.
Thanks for having me.
No, always welcome. But I think there's some key insights there that and oftentimes I find in some of these kind of discussions, it's always the rosy picture of things, but it's good to talk about some of the things that could potentially go wrong and how to resolve those, and the importance of collaboration and relationships. So thanks so much for joining us, taking time out of your busy day and coming down here to our Sydney office. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.